The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome to this week's show the current President Judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, Kevin Brobson. Judge Brobson is the Republican nominee currently for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. That race will be on the ballot this November. Judge Brobson is the son of a Pennsylvania state trooper. He received his undergraduate degree from Lycoming College, magna cum laude. He then went on to law school at the Widener University School of Law, Harrisburg campus, and graduated with his Juris Doctorate, summa cum laude, finishing second in his graduating class. Upon graduation, he clerked for the Honorable James McGurr Kelly, a federal judge for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. After his clerkship, he joined one of the state's largest and most prestigious law firms, Buchanan, Ingersoll & Rooney, based in Pittsburgh. He received the distinction of being rated among the best lawyers in America, 2009. In 2009, Kevin ran for and won statewide election for his seat on the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, becoming its president judge. The Commonwealth Court is the forum that affects most Pennsylvanians because its jurisdiction includes how we educate our children, elect our public officials, preserve our historic and natural resources, as well as cases by citizens that challenge the actions of state or local government. It is this experience that Judge Brobson has that he believes recommends him to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and his qualifications are impeccable.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Judge Brobson, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you.
We don't get a lot of judges on this show. We were kidding. As we talked off air, I said we tend to be a controversial political talk show, and therefore usually have a lot of fun with bringing both sides. Everybody gets equal time, but usually between the scurrilous and unprovable allegations that get raised and the compare and contrast, it's good for a change of pace to have an esteemed member of the bench, a president judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, no less. Why do you want to be a Supreme Court justice? You're in a great position now, Chief Judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. You're accomplished as a professional, esteemed in the profession, and so you're going to take this other step up to a body that's become somewhat controversial because of its rulings. Why?
I've been a Commonwealth Court judge for almost 12 years now. Pleased to serve as the president judge of that court. The Commonwealth Court is a fantastic court. It's the court we have in Pennsylvania, intermediate appellate court right below the Supreme Court, whose responsibility is to make sure government follows the law. So all of these cases that you've mentioned about government following statutes, government following constitutional rights, government compliance with the law, that's what I have done for over almost 12 years now, and for 14 years in private practice as well. My practice has been committed to making sure that my clients who have to deal with business, have to deal with government, understand what the rules of the road are, and then make sure they follow them. But in return, they expect government to do that as well. So when I had the opportunity to run for Commonwealth Court in 2009, it was a natural transition for me to be able to do for the people of Pennsylvania what I have been able to do for my clients. And since then, I've ruled on a lot of cases dealing with statutory construction, like you mentioned. I issued rulings on the elections last year. I've issued rulings dealing with school choice, dealing with gun rights. All of this has to do with how government impacts people, how we educate our children, how we care for our elderly, how we protect our historic and natural resources, how we elect our public officials. This has been my career. And right now, I'm not a former Superior Court judge. I'm not a former Court of Common Pleas Court judge. I'm not a former Family Court judge. But the Supreme Court already has that. What the Supreme Court doesn't have is someone with my experience of making sure government follows the law. And I think everybody, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, want to have faith in their government following the law and that their rights are going to be protected. So that's why I'm running.
Sure. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm kind of off the grid myself, as we talked about in this interview, because in most political elections, and you're running, obviously, you're on the ballot this November for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the Republican nominee for that office. at any rate, I'm somewhat constrained to the type of normal questions I would ask a political candidate, but you're a judge, which is different. So, so if it's appropriate, you mentioned some cases there. Let's look, in our media market, which is 25 or 6 counties as far west as Williamsport, gun rights are an important issue. Is it appropriate, and say if you can't, you can't, but is it appropriate for you to comment on, you said you've issued opinions on gun rights cases. Can you talk about opinions you have written?
I can.
We'll talk. Can you talk about the gun rights case?
Sure. So I refer to it as a gun rights case, and I've issued a couple of them, but the one that's most recent is actually pending in front of the Supreme Court on appeal, which I won't decide because I wrote the decision below. Really wasn't about gun rights at all. What it was about was when a local municipality passes a law that affects your constitutional right, and makes this conduct criminal, that if you engage in it, must you commit the crime to be able to challenge the constitutionality of the ordinance? And under Pennsylvania law, there is a preemption statute in Pennsylvania dealing with gun regulation that says that local municipalities can't pass certain ordinances that regulate guns, regulate gun ownership and gun use and gun possession. A municipality had done that, passed an ordinance. Many municipalities have done that in Pennsylvania. The law, when I came on to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, was the only way you can challenge those ordinances is to violate them first.
Right. So
and
you have to get arrested.
You have to get arrested and charged criminally. Until that happens, you can't challenge them. Well, I don't think law-abiding citizens should have to become law-breaking citizens to vindicate constitutional rights. So what I said, I wrote a dissenting opinion back in 2010, shortly when I came on the court, that says that precedent needs to change. And then a couple of years ago, I wrote a majority opinion for my entire court. It's called an en banc opinion that said that precedent was wrong, and that under certain circumstances, when constitutional rights are involved, people with standing, people who have a direct interest to exercise that right, should be able to challenge the law without having to violate it. And that was simply the case.
Right. Wow, that's, well, I applaud you on that visionary type of thought. And one of the things in our world today, Kevin, and that's why the Supreme Court is so important, and obviously why you're running for it. There is so much acrimony between the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans generally, but to me, it really gets broken down, not to get too far in the weeds in political philosophy, but progressivism versus conservatism. And, the argument that rages across this country, a lot of people I don't know if they understand the philosophical arguments they're making, but they're engaged in them anyway. Either we are born with natural rights that are God-given, and a government's primary function, conservatism, John Locke says, government's function is to protect and preserve your pursuit of freedom and your natural rights. That's government's job. Now, the progressive side, Thomas Hobbes' school of philosophy, looks at it and says, no. We are molded. We aren't born with natural rights or God-given rights. We are molded by society, by economic factors, Karl Marx's opinion, and others, not just that, but that we're molded by the times and the culture we live in, and that government should be the arbiter of what rights we have. There are no natural rights, in other words. So our founders clearly sided with Locke and thought that no, we have inalienable rights. It's right in the Constitution, it's in the preamble, it's in the Declaration of Independence. So the reason now, what relevance does that have to this conversation? Well, it's left to the courts to either rein government in and or not. So again, the importance of your office is that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court faced that very challenge, because what I just talked about is exactly what happened last year. At what point are we told what our rights are versus the exercise of them? When we weigh and balance the needs of the many versus the rights and the freedoms of the few, at the end of the day, because we have gone more and more, governments and progressivism has taken hold and are moving us and saying, no, well, they were ancients and thought in terms of the 18th century, we have to progress and move forward as a society, and we can disregard, basically. So, as you're well aware, as a student of legal history, our U.S. Supreme Court and our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, you'll be facing those decisions yourself when to say no, and for the reasons to say no. So, Your thoughts, kind of in a general way, of the role of courts and where do you intercede? Where do you let government basically have its way?
Well, I have what I think people would refer to as a fairly conservative judicial philosophy. I recognize the judicial branch as a co-equal branch of government, but I also recognize it for what it is and what its role is. And the role of the judiciary is not to write legislation or change legislation or even create policy that the General Assembly is supposed to create. The role of the courts is to vindicate the rights of the people and to ensure that the government is following the laws that are written. This was something that I have been doing, like I said, for over 25 years, including over 11 years in the judiciary. And it's one of the reasons why I got into this case, into this race, is because I think those cases that the Supreme Court decides that impact most Pennsylvanians are cases that really deal with government. Right. You know, whether it's dealing with last year's election or dealing with the COVID-19 in response to the COVID-19 right. pandemic. You know, I know what our Pennsylvania Constitution says about government action. I know what our United States Constitution says about the rights of the people. There's a reason why the Bill of Rights protects us from government action that interferes with those God-given rights that you're talking about. That Bill of Rights doesn't exist to convey rights to us. Right. It exists to protect us from government interaction interfering with those rights. And every issue that I have to deal with deals with something like that. The people need to have faith that a judiciary is going to be there when government does arguably overstep its authority, interfere with the rights of the people. But my job is not to save Pennsylvanians from silly laws. That's not my job. My job is to save people from unconstitutional laws. Right. If the General Assembly were to pass a law or the governor were to pass a law the people of Pennsylvania don't like, then they have a remedy at the ballot box.
Exactly.
They don't have remedies at the courts. And I think a lot of people over the last, I'm not going to say I think Democrats and Republicans have done this for the past 8 or 10 years, running to the courts to fix things that should be fixed in the other branches of government. So my role as a judge is to basically stay in my lane, to not to wear a red jersey, not to wear a blue jersey, but to wear black, to save people, to protect them of constitutional rights, and hold government accountable to the law.
Right. Well, that's a great answer, Judge. Not surprising that it would be from you, but yeah, it's we live in times when I think the role of the courts has been placed, whether wittingly or not, in a profoundly important situation. And look, and I'm not taking a side. Look, my viewers know where I was in Governor Tom Wolf's draconian shutdown. And there was a piece, I wish I can remember verbatim. We put the quotes up. I do a editorial view on Fox News, and it was a circuit judge in Illinois, basically said that people fought and died, and the Bill of Rights you talk to and the Constitution of this country is alive and well in this courtroom, and tyranny is not, and struck down, I guess at that point, struck down the complete shutdown, as we had here, right, to deal with that complete shutdown. But we saw really at loggerheads, really in a way, a profound way for the first time, where you had the emergency powers granted to a governor to act in a state of emergency, and the rights of people that are protected by the United States and Pennsylvania's Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the natural rights we're born with, and all of that, and the courts play a significant role. So this is an important decision people make on this race that you run for.
Yeah, and I think I like you don't like to criticize what the Supreme Court did or did not do. This is what I know based on my experience with the law, based on my understanding of the Pennsylvania Constitution. When the Pennsylvania Constitution gives people the right to pursue a profession. It exists in our Pennsylvania Constitution. The Pennsylvania Constitution also gives the people the right to appeal from an agency decision to a court of record. Right. Actually, my court, the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. Exactly. Yeah. This is what I know. For some reason, Pennsylvanians whose businesses were closed, Pennsylvanians who were unsuccessful in securing a waiver from the Department of Community and Economic Development or whoever made that decision, did not have an opportunity to challenge those decisions in the courts. And that, to me, is one of the reasons why people in Pennsylvania, so many people in Pennsylvania, have lost faith in a government that, not only a government that will follow the law and follow the Constitution, and I'm speaking in generalities, of course, but that's why I enjoy going to work every day. Those are the cases I decide every day. Every Pennsylvanian who's affected by an action of government should have an avenue in the court to get redress, and the court should be open for that.
Right. Well, as you pointed out, your jurisdiction, I had the pleasure of clerking for the Superior Court in Pennsylvania, Judge John P. Hester, and in Pittsburgh. And, you know, I understand fundamentally the difference between the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. And the Commonwealth Court, as you said, I mean, was uniquely situated to deal with everything we faced here because it deals with the state agencies, the government, local government, municipalities, any issues where the government in any sense is a party comes to you. Superior Court got all the nasty criminal stuff. I got to see some interesting transcripts there. It was quite eye-opening an experience, but yes, your court has had tremendous experience dealing with the issues that are most serious right now that we face. You've seen all of them before you. Well, believe it or not, Judge, it's time for a quick break. I want to get, when you come back, talk a little bit about your background, where you're from in Pennsylvania. I reversed. We got into a good conversation. I didn't want to break my train of thought. We usually do that in the first half of the show. But beyond that, you have some specific things that laws you've helped write, and people should know about that if they're going to decide about voting for Supreme Court. Again, we're here today with the President Judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, Kevin Brobson. Extensive experience, judicial and appellate experience. He is running for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania based on the beliefs you've heard, and we know as a society and people the issues that affected our lives last year, the friction between the General Assembly in Pennsylvania and the governor's office, and the national level between Congress and the president. So courts are the arbiters of those things. They should be wearing, actually instead of black, you should have stripes like the referees do and a whistle. But he runs for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. He's on the ballot this November, and we'll be back after these messages.
Every week, Chuck Volpe shares his perspective on Pennsylvania issues in the news and on your mind. From new laws being introduced in Harrisburg and Washington to government spending and even local controversies, hear how they affect us in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. Catch Volpe's views every Tuesday on the Fox 56 News, first at 10.
Welcome back. Again, we're here today with Chief Judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, Kevin Brobson, who aspires to be, and he's the Republican nominee, to become a Supreme Court Justice of Pennsylvania. His name will appear on the ballot in November, and you will have an opportunity to vote for him for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. Hopefully, well, I think most of you know, and as we've talked, Kevin, they know the importance of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. A lot of the most divisive issues, that became very incendiary, to use a word, were based on decisions the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania made, either pro or con, depending on which side you were on. It's an important office, it's an important seat, and it performs a very important function. It guarantees the smooth operation of our separation of powers, is really what it does. So now we've talked a little bit about some of more professional background. Let's talk about who you are as a family and who you are. You're from Montoursville.
I am.
Your father was a state trooper. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your family.
Sure.
People value that and need that information to vote.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't have found my way to Montoursville, Pennsylvania, without starting with my dad, who grew up in Philadelphia. My dad was the son of a Philadelphia city police officer.
Okay.
When he turned 17 and graduated high school, went into the Air Force. So was patrolling a tarmac up in Maine as an air police officer. When he came out of the Air Force, he went to the Pennsylvania State Troopers Academy. And when you graduate, they hand you an envelope and tell you where you're going. And his friends were getting billets in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Erie and all these cities, and he opened his envelope and saw Montoursville. I had no idea where it was. But there he goes, Bob Brobson, freshly minted trooper, to Montoursville, Pennsylvania, in Lycoming County, where he meets my mom, who at the time, no college education, but was working for the state police as a radio control person, handling the radios, and the rest is history in the Brobson family. They got married. My mom's parents had 8th grade educations. They worked for what was Weldon's Pajama Factory in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. In the 1950s, was the largest pajama manufacturer in the world. My grandmother was a seamstress. My grandfather worked as a dishwasher in the cafeteria for the factory. But through grit, determination, and hard work, like many Americans in Pennsylvanians, were able to buy a portion of the factory, buy the cafeteria, build a small business, and become successful. So my parents instilled in me those kind of values, that with hard work, with faith, with grit and determination, anything's going to be possible. So growing up in a small town in Montoursville, the idea that I would be sitting here as the president judge of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania running for Supreme Court Justice was just something I couldn't have possibly imagined. But again, went to Lycoming College, 5 minutes from my parents' house. Meant I could do my laundry over the weekend. Also meant my roommate could do his laundry over the weekend too. But went down the Susquehanna River to Widener University School of Law, and again these values.
Finished second in your class, and
yeah, finished second in my class, and again it's the hard work and determination that my parents taught me. My dad, at one point in time in my life, I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps and my grandfather's footsteps and go into law enforcement, and my father was very steadfast that he wanted more for me, that he wanted me to pursue a legal career because at some point in time he had that interest. And had he not pushed me, had he not set me in that direction, had my mom and he not loved me as much as they did, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So, these are the values that I grew up with. I tell my children the same thing. I'm like, look, we live in the greatest country in the world, and if you work hard, you can achieve anything. Again, through all that hard work, was able to graduate law school pretty well. Clerk for a federal judge in Philadelphia, one of the greatest judges in the Eastern District ever, God rest his soul. And then come back to Central Pennsylvania and work for a Pittsburgh-based law firm, representing, like I said, people and industry and administrative law and government law and constitutional law. And again, I found it to be incredibly rewarding because government affects everyone every day. Right. So the ability to make a career out of that has been something that I've been blessed by. My wife, we've been married for 22 years, Lauren. She's fantastic. She's given me 3 wonderful children. My daughter, Claire, is 21 years old. She goes to Seton Hill University. She's a pediatric cancer survivor. Wow. And she is studying art therapy, wants to work with kids who have gone through the similar trauma that she's gone through. My son Will is 18. He is now at George Washington University, state championship swimmer, Eagle Scout. Wow. And 2 weeks ago, I got to go see him take the oath of office as a Navy midshipman in the NROTC. Wow. So excited about that.
Since we all watched the Summer Olympics this year, what event swimming did he win his state championship?
He was a breaststroker, but he came in 7th place in the state for the breaststroke, but his team won a gold medal in the medley relay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Bishop McDevitt High School, there's a plug for it. Bishop McDevitt High School in Harrisburg.
Great.
And then our caboose, our 14-year-old, he's the one. He's the sports fanatic. He loves sports, loves football, loves baseball. He's in the middle of football season, so I get to see some of his games even while we're on the campaign trail. I miss my kids, but they understand, these statewide races are a family affair.
Of course, yeah. The successful ones especially.
Yeah.
Let's talk now about some of the things that your accomplishments. Again, part of this show is to introduce candidates that are running and things you don't get to hear in a 30-second soundbite. You don't have time for it. We have 30 minutes. So talk a little bit about that. Specifically, is it Jen and Dave's Law you helped author? These are, again, accomplishments and important information voters really need to consider.
Well, yeah, as a family steeped in public service, it's always been in my blood, and I've always tried to find a way, even though my arc hasn't been a direct line, to do something in the public service. So when I was in law school, in my 3rd year of law school, I had an opportunity to work in a civil law clinic with the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And what we were able to do was craft a law, Jen and Dave's Law, that allows estranged spouses in a custody situation to become aware of recent criminal charges or criminal records of their spouse that could affect the custody arrangement and not turn their children over if there's a pending criminal charge against their estranged spouse, to avoid what happened to Jen and Dave, which unfortunately were 2 kids whose the mom handed them off for a weekend to visit their dad. Their dad had recently been charged with a felony, a violent felony, and unfortunately over the weekend he killed Jen and Dave, murdered them, and then took his own life. So we were committed, working with the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, to make sure that parents in those situations are armed with the tools that they need and the information they need to protect their children, which is vitally important. Right. So every opportunity that I have had throughout my career to give back to the public, I have taken. In 2009, when people approached me about running for the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, we had just gotten back from my daughter's Make-A-Wish trip to Florida.
Right.
So running for office at that time.
You had a daughter again with pediatric cancer.
Pediatric cancer,
Yeah,
yep.
survivor.
Survivor, leukemia. She's treated at Penn State Hershey Children's Hospital. Fantastic treatment there. But I just gotten back from a Make-A-Wish trip, and I was called to interview to run for Commonwealth Court. It didn't come at the most opportune time, obviously, in practice or in family. But we were a family of faith. And we believe that when God opens up a door, He wants you to go through it. So we did it, and it worked out well, and I've been pleased to serve the people of Pennsylvania ever since. Had the opportunity to serve as the sole appellate judge appointed to the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board, which reviews criminal charges, but ethical charges against judges in Pennsylvania. And very happy with the record that I have there. I think people don't want their judges to be partisan, and even though as I'm running as a Republican, I have a nonpartisan record. I was appointed by the Supreme Court, Democrats and Republicans, to be the appellate member of this body, and when I got there, the members of that body, Democrats and Republicans, lawyers and lay people from across the state, elected me as board chair.
Wow.
And then recently, the highest recommendation from the Pennsylvania Bar Association and the election by my colleagues on Commonwealth Court, Democrats and Republicans, to serve as president judge. So when I say I will be a nonpartisan judge, I have a record to back it up.
Right. Well, we're down to the last couple minutes of the show. I always tell my guests, especially first-time guests, that the 30 minutes, it's like flies by. It seems like a long time. We live in a world of sound bites on the 6 o'clock news or 30-second commercials, and think, wow, a half hour. Well, it goes by pretty quick. But at any rate, with the last couple minutes we have, effectively, your closing statement as a candidate that will be on the ballot this November for Supreme Court. Why should the citizens of Pennsylvania vote for you to be a Supreme Court justice?
I've, as an appellate judge and trial court judge for over 11 years, I've handled cases that impact everyday Pennsylvanians, not just litigants in front of me. I try to write decisions that everybody can understand so they can hold me accountable, but they understand why I reach those decisions. I will bring a new voice and a new perspective to the Supreme Court with the experience that I have dealing with government, dealing with constitutional rights. And I believe when you're building a team and you're trying to build people's confidence in a team, you want to add experience. You don't want to duplicate it. So I'm offering my experience, my record, my temperament, my reputation to the people of Pennsylvania as their next Supreme Court justice, and I will work hard for them every day to earn their trust and their respect, just as I have done for the last 11 years on the Commonwealth Court.
Right. Well, very well stated, Kevin. I want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy traveling the state. It is a big state, I know firsthand, not only for my business travels, but having been a statewide candidate myself a long time ago. So I was teasing you before, at least you guys running nowadays have the advantage of deep GPS and smartphones to get to places. We were looking at maps, talking with the Home Office, getting lost.
We've had a map out once or twice. There's not a lot of good signal in some parts of the state.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of good friends in Shamokin. They didn't have a GPS recognition there. It said you're off the grid. I always tease my friends from Shamokin about that. But at any rate, Judge, thank you for making time to be on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to interview someone that has done so much for this Commonwealth. So thank you.
Thank you.
Again, we are here today with President Judge of the Commonwealth Court, Kevin Brobson, and he is running for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania in November, and we've given you a lot to consider why you should vote for him. We'll be back next Sunday at 10:30.